This is Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric ClaVille. Welcome. Thank you for joining us again on this Sunday as last Sunday of Black History Month. If you joined us all Black History Month, you know that we've talked about the Black church and different aspects of it with our partnership with WNSB, Blazing Hot 91, in conjunction with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and also PBS and WHRO. And today we're going to talk about Black History Month itself. Now, we've heard Black History Month. We've grown up with it for those of you who are 70s babies, 60s babies, and the like. But I want to kind of go into the reason why we should. Should we continue to celebrate Black History Month? Why should we celebrate Black History Month? And also, how can we expand Black history itself? Again, but I want to thank you again for joining us. And we have a special guest today with us. Is a good friend of mine, Dr. Will LaVeist. Will, thank you again for joining us.
Always a pleasure, ClaVille. Always a pleasure, man.
Will was on the show in the first half hour where we discussed adding soul to the message and discussing, how have we missed the mark, in talking about healthcare to African Americans? And he's back again here to join us as we talk about Black History Month. Will, when was the first time that you remember in school or in church or the community a Black History Month program?
Yeah, I think actually it was I first became aware of Black History Month from my parents, who were very much stalwarts of Black history, particularly my mom, being an a Pan-Africanist. My father was very much successful in education. So I can first remember it being talked about in the home, but then, I think the actual program probably occurred at school, and it was probably something about Frederick Douglass and, Harriet Tubman and maybe Booker T and Martin Luther King. And that was it. And that was it, and that was essentially it. That was a wrap for Black history. But obviously, we've since learned that Black history, predates Africans arriving on these shores. So it goes much deeper than that. And I thank God for Carter G. Woodson, one of my heroes, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, for establishing Black Negro History Week, which expanded to Black History Month that we know as today.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking 1926, Carter G. Woodson, the Harvard-trained historian, who was really a visionary,
Absolutely.
And, again, him, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, other great thinkers of yesteryear, Frederick Douglass.
And a little known Black history fact is that Carter G. Woodson actually went to Lincoln University for about a semester, and then he left, and I'm not sure why he did, but he was at Lincoln for about a semester, and then went on to earn his PhD. Absolutely.
And look, the reason why Will mentions Lincoln University, because he is a proud graduate of Lincoln University. They're currently running for a position on the board there. So
absolutely.
Who loves his institution, just like here, we love Norfolk State University where WNSB is. But again, a visionary in 1926. And what people don't realize is that, like you said, it started out as Negro History Week to coincide with the birthdays of two figures that are tremendous in African American experience, who are, of course,
President Lincoln and then also Frederick Douglass.
Absolutely. I believe that I know we look at people who are out front, right, and they get the notoriety and the like, but in my time, I found that the most influential people, many times, are the people you don't even know about, that are talking to those who have the power, right? The power to move the needle. And Frederick Douglass was definitely one of those individuals to move the needle. He was one of the main advisors to Abraham Lincoln, during that time period. And of course, we know Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass played a major part in the abolishing slavery, in galvanizing the Union, African-American soldiers serving in the military. Frederick Douglass was a big proponent of that, to show, quote unquote, that the Negro, of course known as African Americans today, but the Negro loved his country. even though, again, that was to show it, but we know we did because we built it, right?
Absolutely,
Get,
absolutely. I mean, Frederick Douglass is one of our Jeremias. His famous Fourth of July speech. I mean, continues to resonate today. So you're right. I mean, he was critical and he's among one of the founding fathers of this nation, literally, because of his push for liberation and to push the nation to actually be what it had promised it would be, a nation for all people, freedom, justice for all.
Absolutely. And then, we went from Negro History Week because, well, first of all, again, the reason why Carter G. Woodson created it is because he felt that America itself really did not understand the contributions of African Americans or the Negro to America. So it was to educate America and the world, okay, because he was also a visionary of the world citizen in understanding how African Americans and the Black experience really impacted the world, because America impacted the world at that time. So, and it was not only to educate America, educate the world, but also bring into remembrance of African American or the Negro at that time, the benefits, the contributions of great people of African descent.
Right, and to show the resilience and greatness and intelligence and faithfulness, godly faithfulness of a people, to be able to point out that we, of anyone, have undergone a tremendous attack in this country. Our indigenous brothers and sisters obviously, suffered a great sacrifice for this country to be built, and we as enslaved people suffered a tremendous sacrifice for this nation to be built. So to ignore, these peoples and these sacrifices that happen is at the detriment of the nation.
Absolutely.
Itself, and our culture, African Americans, what we were able to do, what our ancestors were able to do, is a term called neoculturation, where you take different pieces and parts of other cultures, combine with your own, and create a new cultural phenomenon. Yeah. And so that's what we were doing. That's what we did. Our music is original American music. Soul food is original to American. This is a delicacy. This is a food that has been developed from influences from indigenous, from African, from Europe, and it was the Black servants of people like Jefferson and Washington. I believe it was a chef called Hercules who was the first celebrity chef. Well, he was a Black man.
Yeah.
So, and he was creating original American cuisine.
So, in other words, people came for his food, not just so much for the meetings or guests at his house, but for the food that he was cooking, because they heard about this guy.
Right, and he's creating it by combining these different cultural influences and making it original American cuisine. So this is what our culture has done throughout. You see that permeating throughout many ways, many arenas. And this is why Black people, as I believe we had it right when we said Afro-American people.
Right.
The people of Africa, the Middle Passage descendants, this is what we have been, why we're so important to this nation.
Absolutely. And then you talk about food. I just want to throw this in there. Not only were we creating these dishes, but we were creating it without formal, quote unquote, formal training, right? We were taking a little bit here, a little bit there, and going, through our God-given creativity and ingenuity. A lot of, the Creole cuisine of Louisiana is just that, where Africans took French and Spanish and African spices, and they combined it all together and created these phenomenal dishes that people fly in from all over the world just to have a little gumbo, a little etouffee, a little po' boy, a little red beans and rice.
We're getting hungry. And then the interesting thing is that, as you mentioned, those dishes, right? For example, because food is a very good way of being able to trace a people's culture and see similarities.
Absolutely.
Well, you talk about red beans and rice. Well, you go down to the Caribbean, You're going to see some of that, right?
Rice and peas.
That's right. You go into the deep south. You go into Alabama. You go to the northwest. You're going to see these similarities within our culture because, and that's one of the things that's powerful about our culture also, that is very portable because we've
Right.
been able to adapt different cultures. A lot of times when people are exposed to us, right, they see parts of their culture in us, and
In our culture, exactly.
it resonates with them. You know,
Absolutely.
so this is why, for example, the most recent example that we have of that is hip hop. The ability to be able to remix and take and match and to take things and flip it around and make it fresh and new. That is uniquely African American. And that's why that particular cultural artifact, art form has been so powerful and has traveled so far and wide.
Absolutely. You listen to Stay in the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric ClaVille. Today, we are talking with Dr. Will LaVeist as we talk about Black History Month on this last day in February. We talk about the importance of Black History Month, why we should still celebrate it, and what we can learn about it. 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. Let us know your thoughts about when you first started celebrating, your first memory of Black History Month and the importance of Black History Month to you. Now, Will, we just started talking about Negro History Week, created by Carter G. Woodson, but it turned into Black History Month under President Gerald Ford in 1876. And I know a lot of times we attach Gerald Ford, of course, to taking over for Richard Nixon and the pardon of Richard Nixon and the like. But there were some good things that Gerald Ford did do outside of what we perceive to be negative on his resume. And one of those things were creating and signing a bill to have February as Black History Month. And I want to give a quote here that he stated, which I think is so important even to this day. He said, "The country needed to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history."
Mm-hmm.
I think that still resonates today. And I think it goes, and it will, I think it goes to the very heart and the nature of why Carter G. Woodson created, Negro History Week within itself.
Yeah, I mean, he how can you say it much clearer, and also the fact that, a big part of America culture is these contradictions. I mean, if you've been to the Museum of African American History, right, you see the story. I mean, I would tell anyone, please go there because not only will you get an understanding of our culture, but you're going to understand our country. And our country is just full of contradictions in leadership, but yet and still, but in spite of, we continue to progress on. So like you said, you look at it, Gerald Ford, and he's not typically associated with doing anything positive for African American history, but we'll turn to Bill Clinton. We say, oh, he was actually the first Black president before we had a first Black president. Yet his policies were extremely
detrimental
to the Black community, particularly if you compare them to Ford's, right? So this is one of the things about us as a people. We've been uniquely positioned because of the oppression to actually be able to put a mirror in front of America to see itself, to see its contradictions, and to maybe strive to become a better nation. But America continues to be a country of a lot of contradictions. So people who you would have thought, were just lost and just totally anti-Black, you find, no, they actually weren't. And some of the people that you think were so pro-Black, well, actually weren't, and that's why understanding history is so important.
Absolutely. Now, some people believe, of course, you're always going to have naysayers. You have proponents and opponents. That is human nature, right?
Right.
So, but I believe the important thing is to agree to disagree. So let's get to it. There's some people believe that Black History Month is not needed at all because it ignores, and matter of fact, I've heard this when I was in school, and I still hear it from adults. Individuals say, why do we have Black History Month? It's racist because we don't have a White History Month. And you're right. You give yourself a little pause. And then, I would ask, how many pages? I said, go to your history book. What, 5th grade, 8th grade? 12th grade, and go through it and tell me how many pages do you see of African American contribution to the American experience, right? So for the most part, if you got a 500-page history book, maybe 50 pages at the most, and I'm being very generous, I'm including the glossary and the index and all that, is actually committed to the African American experience. I mean, so what would you say to those individuals who say we don't need Black History Month because it excludes White History Month?
Well, I say that's that all lives matters mentality. When the Black Lives Matter movement, erupted, people were so quick to knee jerk and say, well, all lives matter. And you're not understanding that what you're doing is you're denying the fact that here's a group of people who have been marginalized. And what we're saying is, no, we matter too. Langston Hughes wrote the poem, I too sing America.
Right.
You're saying we matter too. So when you keep saying, no, everybody matters, what you're doing is you're denying that this group has been marginalized. So that's what I say to people is that for you to say, well, you don't need Black history because you don't have a White History Month is because all of the months are White History Months. As you just said, you look at the textbooks. The textbooks are written from a white perspective on history. The textbooks don't show the indigenous people's perspective as it pertains to these same events. It's not showing the African Americans' perspective or the others who have been involved. The history that we see is from that mindset of, well, the victor claims the spoils. The victor gets to tell the narrative. So when we get, I like the saying that I've seen out there that, all lives matter when Black lives matter. That's the mindset we need to have when we are truly have a level playing field that people like Martin Luther King fought for. Then, yeah, maybe you can say at that point that you won't need a Black History Month. But as long as you are still not fully aware of the contributions that people have made, the important contributions, obviously we need.
Yeah, and it kind of segue into my next point where, when we talk about Black History Month and the need for it, I think we do still need it. It's obvious until our history reflects all of the experiences of Africans in America. And when I say all of the experience, I mean the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because a lot of our experiences have been at the hands of the white establishment or the government, if people want to call it that, limiting the advancement of African Americans or people of Afro descent into advancing into society. I mean, so we've got to include Tulsa, Oklahoma, right?
Exactly.
I mean, as a matter of fact, we've had now, like you said, COVID's unveiled a lot of things, and it's also unveiled and how history has been hidden purposefully, from society. So, Tulsa was a terrible, terrible time in our nation and in Tulsa itself. But we got to tell that story, right? We still got to tell the story of the Tuskegee experiment, which we do, but we also have to tell the story of forced sterilization in the Mississippi Delta, which Fannie Lou Hamer was a part of, right? We got to tell the story of HeLa cells, right? Of research and science taking cells out of her body without her people's consent and still using it today, and making money off of it, right? So AIDS research, all types of research has been done off of this Black woman's body that nobody had permission to take. I mean, but it's not just those terrible stories of the bad history, which came up on us, but the great history. I know a lot of times we look at inventions, the street light and so forth, and the stop sign, and we just take it for granted. But we don't tell the story of how African Americans were involved in creating these instruments and mechanisms, all the way from the plantation, all the way up to technology. African Americans have been the forefront of that.
Yeah, I mean, we have an African American that just recently went in space. So Black History Month allows this time, to be able to focus and say, wait a minute, just take a break and look at the greatness of Black culture and how it's permeating. And I think, as you said, the more that we can have that kind of equality, that equal opportunity to tell your story, to be permeated throughout the year, then you'll have less of a need for it. But why would you feel that there should be less of a need for it? To me, someone who's talking that way is saying, well, maybe they're saying this is not something that they want to learn about. Maybe they're saying this is not something they want to be exposed to. Because me, as an American, as a member of the human family, I'm curious about all kinds of different people and cultures and want to know and respect them. So anybody who's saying, you don't need it at this point and we don't have a White History Month, the unstated message that you're delivering is, I'm not interested in learning about you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I want to take a look at this article that was written by Jamar Tisby of the Witness, witness.bcc.com. And he talks about 5 reasons we should celebrate Black History still. And I want to throw these out there to you and give me your thoughts about it, Will. He says we should celebrate Black History because, one, it celebrates and honors the historic leaders of the Black community. He says doing this allows us to take a pause and remember their stories so we can commemorate their achievements.
Oh, I agree. I mean, the leaders are who inspire you to see what it is that you've been called to do and what you can do. And a lot of times when you learn the stories of these leaders, you find out that they really came from beginnings that were much like your own. Yeah. And so they have more in common with you than you may think. And these leaders, like I'm recalling right now, a time I had to interview the late John Lewis and spent time with him when I had my radio show.
Also your fraternity brother, right?
Yeah, also Phi Beta Sigma fraternity brother. And in his presence and learning his story, I mean, he made me feel like he was honored to be with me. And I left him feeling like, hey, I got more to do. I'm not doing enough. I gotta get going. So when you learn about the leaders, they inspire you to see what it is that you can do. I mean, I just saw the movie about Billie Holiday that is out now. I mean, powerful movie that shows you how much of a fighter and a resilient woman that she was. We're used to seeing Billie as a tragic figure, Miss Holiday, but in that movie, you see about how powerful, about how strong, about how steadfast she was to her art and to her people. So these stories are very important.
Yeah, and that story is told by Lee Daniels, who directed that, and we see how we're telling stories from our perspective, and which is very important because we see it through 2 different lenses, which is why, again, I believe African American History or Black History Month itself is so very important. And we should celebrate it every single day. Also, Jamar writes, he says, celebrating us, it helps us to be a better steward of the privileges that we've gained. And, and Will, my comment to that is when I look at the 50s and 60s and I grew up, 70s and 80s, and my neighborhood, African American neighborhood, we had, Black business. African and Black men owned the gas station, barbershops, beauty shops, insurance company, Black lawyer, law office, of course, the repair shop. We had the daycare in the community. And everywhere we went, funeral homes, insurance companies, we went, we did a lot of business with Black business because that's where we live.
Right.
And we saw Black men and women carry themselves in a way of with and I'll just say a way of importance, right? Because and we looked upon them and said, I want to be like that. And sometimes I scratch my head, and I see how drugs were poured into our communities and have decimated them.
Right.
And
to
now
break all that down. Yeah.
And it breaks all it down, and it really comes and it breaks my heart. But I know that if we understand our history, we can better build ourselves up again, right? Build back Black communities better. And I took that little piece from Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, Build Back America Better, right? So we can build Black America back better if we understand our history.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, especially now, because now that the economy is open to us in ways that it was not open to us then because of segregation, now we have the opportunity to be able to produce product and sell it to the world.
Yeah.
So if we can understand our tradition of entrepreneurship that we come from and say, okay, now we have more opportunities than those brothers and sisters had, that we had more opportunities than Madam C.J. Walker had, who became the first woman millionaire, right? We now have a more multicultural, more global market that we can sell to. So why not be inspired and get moving and get going?
Absolutely. And when you open up your eyes, and we talked about hip hop earlier, like I saw a documentary where it showed hip hop around the world. Hip hop has touched every single country in the world. From the South Korean Asian movement. I saw a rap group in Iran.
Man, I told you, you remember I tell the story about being in Mongolia and cats playing hip hop. I'm walking in the street in Mongolia and they cats playing hip hop and jumped out the car and took a picture with me. I mean, but go ahead, yeah.
And I was watching a documentary again also about I think it was actually Nelson Mandela. And they were going through a shanty town, and you saw the name Biggie and Tupac written on a shanty house, right? In the shanty town. I'm saying, wait a minute, did I just see that? Yeah. But it tells you how the influence of Black Americans, again, going back, and as you said, how African American culture influences everything. Another thing, Will, and we're running out of time, but celebrating Black history provides us an opportunity, I believe, to highlight our best and brightest of Black history and culture, because so many times, we're displayed in a negative light. Also, it helps us create awareness for our people and remind us, I think the most important, that Black history is our history. It's American
Amen.
history.
Amen. And that's why what you're doing with your show, and you mentioned Lee Daniels and other filmmakers, other artists, is so important to be true to that part of the art, to show our best and our brightest, and to inspire us, inspire the world.
Well, look, I've loved this time with you. And of course, we spent a lot of time together. Very quickly, we're in our last 60 seconds of the show. Tell our audience where they can learn more about our project and what we do.
LaVeistandClaVille.com, LaVeistandClaVille.com, our podcast where we join forces to talk about the issues that are most important to our community in a way that everybody can understand it and break it down and actually be empowered to make change. And also on social media.
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at LaVeist and ClaVille. You can find Black history every single day, 365. We highlight our treasures of Black history at LaVeist and ClaVille. Dr. Will LaVeist, thank you so much for joining us here on State of the Water.